Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Food is Life. I'm your host, Raheen Khan, Executive Director of Meal Exchange. So excited to see you here again. Thanks so much for being here. Today, we have a really incredible guest to present to you, and I'm excited to have Natasha Alani on the show today. So let me do a formal introduction first, and then I'll bring Natasha on the line. So Natasha's work spans 5 countries and covers finance to design research and reaches from food to media. She has a proven track record of leading and developing high-performing teams that exceed expectations. Natasha began her career in finance, which included working in M&A in Boston. She later led an ethnographic design research trip to Kuch, India, to understand how interactive design could mitigate the impact of illiteracy on the growing technological divide. This resulted in the development and publishing of design principles and research practices through Adaptive Path, an international design consultancy. Natasha's work was featured at the San Francisco UX Design Conference, as well as in the book Steampunk and 19th Century Digital Humanities. Natasha's journey in social justice began in San Francisco, where she led 2 businesses providing on the job training for employees managing severe mental illness. Natasha's love for social entrepreneurship resulted in a sustainable food services company called Kiffin, which served organizations like C2 and McKinsey Consulting in their efforts to promote sustainability through food. While at McGill, Natasha served as the president of the DeSoto's African Business Initiative, and after living and working from Boston to San Francisco and from China to Yanda, she now oversees operations as the COO at the McConnell Foundation, a leader in Canadian social innovation and social finance. Welcome, Natasha.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Hi.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to have you. I just want to start by saying that, Meal Exchange is so grateful to have you. We're happy to know that you're part of our board now, and also that the McConnell Foundation has been such a great supporter of Meal Exchange over the last several months. So thanks so much for all that, you represent. And so Natasha, tell us, we're really excited. This particular episode is really focused on like food access and, the ability to access culturally appropriate food. What was the Kiffin project?
Yeah. Well, thank you for your great leadership. And I mean, it feels like you are working around the clock along with your team, but I really first want to thank you. We're here to support you. Um, and the Kiffin project, it was an idea that I started in San Francisco. I had been working in social justice and access to employment. First for people with mental health disabilities, and then with racial biases. And the thing that just always came up for me, and I had experienced it in my own life, was that if you're not eating well and you're expected to have exceptional cognitive functioning and good mood and be able to put yourself out there. I felt like they're already living in a system that's not working for them, and then if on top of that they're not eating well, you have a serious issue. And then I began to look at the people who were working in these fields. So typically many of us who go into these fields have had some of our own experiences and want to give back. We have lived experience of any number of issues, and we are not compensated very well, and putting ourselves out there and trying to lead and support others, and then we ourselves are still not eating well. So what I was able to do for the people that we were serving was to work with my colleagues who wanted to put food first and make that part of our programming. But then then my attention started to go towards nonprofit workers, the teachers, the social workers, the nurses, everyone who was supporting everybody else and their ability to eat. And during this time, I was living in San Francisco, and in San Francisco in 2012, I would say, maybe 2013, you were considered low income if you were earning less than $72,500. And that is way more than most nonprofit workers are getting paid. And so I'm thinking, okay, we have the working poor, and who's feeding them? And that became where I was really interested in. And I started creating batch meals based on the tiffin model, which is a model for food delivery in India. Mm-hmm. So in India, most workers prefer homemade food versus restaurant food. And there is a system called the tiffin system, which you can look up. And it gets women who are in their homes cooking meals to get food to office workers. And you kind of prepay for the month. You get home cooked meals. They get delivered to you, and they get delivered in stainless steel containers. I wish I had one with me. They get delivered in these stainless steel containers that are durable and sanitary, but also sustainable because they're reusable. And so I was aware of that model because I have Indian heritage and had used tiffins when I was younger. And then I thought, okay, well, how can we use this model, which is obviously affordable food, and do it here? And then, drew from my own culinary experiences, having Indian heritage, but having family that was born and raised in Africa. And then myself, I lived in the South. And so, I had fun using unique and underpriced ingredients to create healthy meals that could serve many at an affordable price. And so it was like everything from okra dishes, which are somewhat Southern and somewhat Indian, to lentil dishes and a million things in between.
Very cool. That's great. Well, I love the fact that, you didn't shy away from your heritage, and, it was such a big part of the work that you were trying to do, which is really great. So what was the single most memorable moment you've had to date with food?
My family left Uganda during the time of Idi Amin and came to Canada as refugees. Mm. And then as things stabilized, my whole family went back. And we went back in the 90s, and it was a challenging time for my family. We had a lot of social capital, but not financial capital. And that social capital came from a strong community. Mm-hmm. And so what that meant was that food was challenging, and yet there were people nearby who ensured that we had the food we needed. And so there was a woman who was an excellent cook, and it was the first time I had ever used a tiffin, and she would leave the tiffins. We paid her weekly or by the day, but she would leave them at the door, and it would be like just delicious home cooked food, different every day. But the experience of kind of being in a difficult situation in life, things are uncertain, things are unfamiliar. And then we would just like go to our door, and there were these little tiffins filled with wonderful home cooked food that had just kind of been delivered. And I just remember how much I loved it and how exciting it was, and how like I would wait all day to figure out, because there was no menu. We just paid this woman per week, and we had no idea what we were going to get. And then because things were tough, we were 3 people eating, but we would only get 2 and split the food between each other. And I just, it's my favorite memory with food.
That's really, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's quite something. I mean, it must have been fun to see, or to be. There must have been a bit of a surprise element, right? To be able to like figure out what was happening. So that's kind of the nice and the lighter side of things. But certainly to have to share limited food across family is always very difficult. So I appreciate you sharing that. It's one of the things that we really think about when we're talking. Um, about food insecurity in general with meal exchange, and how we look at not just students but also individuals in general, and how I always say, like, having my own lived experience around food insecurity, like I'm fine to have more than enough food, because it can be leftovers can always be, you know, reused in some ways or reimagined, but it's so difficult when there's just not enough to go around. It's truly very painful. So tell us, Natasha, how has your relationship to food changed over the last several years?
It has always occupied like the biggest part of my mind. And like the proof is in the pudding. Like my first social justice job was running cafes. My entrepreneurial efforts was in food, and then I married a chef. Just like there's nothing I can do about it. So my relationship to food, it almost brings tears to my eyes, because being able to eat what I want is such a privilege.
Yes.
And so, yeah, my relationship to food has deepened, and my appreciation of being able to choose what I eat, be aware of the kind of nutrition I'm getting. It makes me feel privileged in a way that I'm not used to, and I think by being involved in organizations like yours, I feel a little bit better about that privilege. So you're doing more for me than I'm doing for you.
That's great. Yeah, it's definitely. I remember, us having to. When I have a lot of younger siblings, and growing up, we didn't have a lot either. So I just remember having to like rush to make food because the kids would be really hungry, and so trying to figure out what to make with the limited resources was always quite interesting. I mean, now it's like we get like in solidarity. I had ordered a good food box from Food Share, and I was like, oh, cool, this is the kind of neat thing to do. I don't know what's in the box, but I will be able to make something that I enjoy, and it's kind of neat to be able to do that. So then, one of the things, in your opinion, I mean, you've talked about this idea of the Kiffin project, and how it was in a way providing sort of a variety of culturally appropriate foods to different individuals. So, in your opinion, what are some of the barriers, do you think, to accessing culturally appropriate food for people of color communities?
Yeah, I think I will preface this that I have not studied this issue. I only know it through experience. And so what I see is a few things. One is the kind of, it doesn't feel equal. It feels like culturally appropriate food is a little bit lower in prestige and value, and people expect it to be cheaper, and people expect it to be mom and pop, and people want flavors to be punched up and not necessarily authentic. This is just my perception. It may not be true. And if my perception is shared by others, even if it's true or not, then that will limit the ability for culturally appropriate food to get into supply chains, because it's not taken seriously. And I think that when we think about how people of color and access their foods, where are they going? And if they can only get it in certain neighborhoods where the rent is at a certain price or something, and not on their school campuses, then that's going to be challenging. And food is about nutrition, but it's also about emotions, and it's about comfort, and it's about, um, even the way different cultures process their food, it's extremely different. And so making it accessible, I mean, I think is ambitious, but has tremendous value in helping a diverse country like Canada have people have whole lives.
Mhm.
And I think getting it into the supply chain, and having it show up in ways where it's on your it's in the cafeterias or other places, I think that is something we should strive towards.
Absolutely. And then I think one of the other things to kind of mention around the accessibility of culturally appropriate foods is also, broadening it a bit more to say just generally access to good food, right? Like when we think about food insecurity and just the notion of like food deserts and not being able to actually access food in that way. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, thank you. This, yeah, and like going into the access to good food, then also brings up, where I would like to learn more is about how do we have culturally appropriate food in countries that may have different climates and um, different local food, and
Mhm.
and how does food evolve, and so I'm going to take a step back before I take a step forward. And I think this is really interesting, especially when if I look back at my own heritage. I'm an Indian whose family has been in Africa for several generations, and so the food I eat is very, very different, and it was influenced by the countries that our families were in. And so I think there's like the anthropology, I guess, of food that's interesting. But then when you go back to the just the premise of like good food, and we need it for proper brain functioning, um, and and being part of communities, this is just appalling. Again, my examples are American. I lived and worked in San Francisco with Boys and Girls Clubs who had um, who had clubs in various low income neighborhoods, and a couple of them were less than 10 minutes from downtown, and had zero grocery stores, no food delivery, and essentially the food was either from a corner store or from the Boys and Girls Club.
Right.
And
Wow.
these are entire neighborhoods in one of the wealthiest cities, and not off the 7 by 7 area of San Francisco. It was not outside of the city on the edges. It's right there.
That's it's hard to know like the word that comes to me is like inappropriate. That's so inappropriate for it to be so close to the downtown, and to realize that people are struggling to the point where they can't access good food outside of a community center or community agency, if you want to call it that, and a corner store. In Toronto, we have some food deserts as well, and this is the same thing. Like, having spoken to a number of people, like sometimes it's so much easier in those communities for what is accessible. Let's put it that way. What is accessible is the McDonald's and the Pizza Hut and the Pizza and all the other things that would give them some kind of a meal for $2 than to have to spend $6 to take the bus to another community, to then go and buy groceries, to then actually need to learn how to take the time to cook the meal. In which case, not all communities, at this point, not all individuals, particularly students, have the ability to cook either, right? So, it takes time and skill to do that. So there's so many, pieces to dealing with this issue, in particular. So it's good that the Boys and Girls Club was actually doing that. That's quite remarkable.
It's a great organization. Still doing it.
Wow,
Yeah,
amazing.
I mean, and when you say this, it just kind of, it makes me think of even the judgment that comes for low income families who choose to buy affordable food that may not be healthy. And it's really frustrating to see that they're already in a difficult situation, and now you're judging their choices without even understanding all the choices before that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's people. There's always that question around. I know, and even in the food movement, is like, well, is it about access to food or is it about access to good food, right? And we obviously, the goal is to have good food, but sometimes the basics are also essential, and so then it's like, well, we need to get them food first, right? So. Um, I know when I was working at one of the food banks, like one of the challenges were, in order to make it accessible, they had brought them to the party room. So once a week, they were doing like these little kind of makeshift food banks, right, where you could actually go and pick up the foods that you wanted. But even still, like the options for protein, for example, for families was like, okay, a jar of peanut butter or 6 eggs, right, for the week. So what do you choose? Like it's just. Some perhaps would choose the peanut butter and others would choose the eggs, right? So, it's this type of thing. And to be able to give people to realize that the options are limited to start with, and then being able to select what makes the most sense for you as a family is just something that people often overlook for sure.
Yeah, the trade-offs are the number of trade-offs that you have to make every day are,
Mhm.
are staggering.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Natasha, was like, you came up with this pretty innovative solution, and now you're at McConnell, which is all about innovation. How can communities and advocates work together to create innovative solutions to make, for example, culturally appropriate food more accessible?
Thank you for that question. I think I can, again, only speak from my experience, but what I think is
Mhm.
very important is to remember that if it was an easy solution or an obvious solution, it would have been done. And if it was
Yeah.
obviously profitable, it would definitely have been done. So you're going to have to really um, like don't be afraid to brainstorm and put
Mhm.
out ideas that don't make sense until you find the one that does. If you're looking to do something, and then you have to be pragmatic and say, will this make money, and will this make money for a while, if
Right.
in order for it to be sustainable. And that first step, I find,
Mm.
is hard when people are starting from trying to do something somebody else has already done. So,
Mhm.
and so the alternative to that is understand what's already been done. If you can, talk to the people who've done it, because I mean, and for me personally, I always want to help anybody working in food, even if my project is no longer something that I'm working on. I want somebody to build on it, because
Mhm.
then my work is not lost. And I know that many other people feel that way. So try to see what's already been done, but not in a competitive way, and not in a way to duplicate, but in a way to build.
Right. Yeah, that's great. It's I know from experience as well. We often think, okay, let's start from scratch, or let's create the wheel again, right? And it's not necessarily the case. And it's good to know that people like yourself are willing to share and like share your learning, so that others don't have to make the same mistake, or others can learn from the things that you've learned, right? Which is really nice. So that's great. Well, we're almost out of time. Do you have any kind of last thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
And now, thank you so much for listening. I don't know how big is this audience?
Well, we've got quite a reach across Canada now with students and other supporters as well. So it's always good to, it's been really great that we've been able to have these really great conversations with so many people who connect with food in so many different ways, right? So, we really do value the fact that food is life, and so it's really nice that you were on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work you do to put this together and cultivating an audience and trying to bring value. And I hope that I did you proud.
Sure. Thanks so much.
Take
Okay,
care.
we'll speak soon. Take care. Bye. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Food is Life. We have had such great conversations with so many interesting people. And as we've said, food is life. And there's so many ways that we all connect with food. It's just really great to have these conversations and to really bring another level of awareness on what food really means and the impact that food has on people's lives. Couple of things before we go. Just a reminder that if you're able to give us any support through our Good Food Now project, please do so. Our program is coming to an end at the end of the month, and there's still a lot of students that are in really severe situations and are looking for support. So you feel free to go to goodfoodnow.ca and do that. We're also going to be hosting a panel discussion, an extension of our show, The Food is Life, on July the 9th. You can learn more at mealexchange.com. The event is going to be focused on the Black community and the impact to food access. We're doing it in solidarity at this time. So we look forward to seeing you there. And so please do register. So that's it for this week. Hope you have a good week, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.